Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the press, and good morning to all the listeners out there who are tuning into ZJB right now. We're coming to you from the Statistics Building in St. John's for the Governor's final press conference here on Montserrat. And as we usually do for these press conferences, His Excellency would open with a few remarks, and then we'll swiftly hand over to the media to ask their questions. For this press conference, we'll be doing 2 questions per media house and then passing along. And when we get to the end, if we have any more questions, we'll come back around. We have 1 hour for this event. So without further ado, let me hand over to H.E.
Oh, we've got some further ado. Bennett wanted to...
I have to register my objection to these 2 questions. Thank you, sorry. Good morning, everybody. I have to register my objection to these 2 questions. It doesn't work. I can ask 2 questions, one which gets an answer yes, one which gets an answer no. That's a question, and that's another question. Most questions, especially in our setting today, will require follow-up. Sometimes I start my questioning with a follow-up on something that has gone before, because that's how we all do. We don't want to be asking the same questions going round and round. So the 2-question thing doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't make sense. Certainly not in today's situation, when I'm sure the governor will have quite a lot to say. And we have a lot of things to ask.
I'm just going to stop you there. We have 1 hour for this event, and there are multiple journalists here. And I'm sure all of you have loads of questions that you would like to ask, and we've worked together really well for the last 4 years, so I'm sure that we can come together and ask as many questions as we want of the governor before he leaves the island. So if it's okay, H.E.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Esther, and thank you, Bennett. I'm sure we can work flexibly on that. We have to have a guideline, I think, of the 2 questions. Otherwise, it's not fair to people. And we do have limited time, but we can be flexible, as Esther says, on that. Let's go with that and see how we get on. Well, look, I mean, thank you very much, ladies and gents of the media. I must say it's a very sad day for me and for my family. We're not really looking forward at all to leaving Montserrat. We've loved our time here a very great deal, and there's a certain element of sort of self-deception with me. I'm trying to sort of pretend that it's still some way away. So having a final press conference rather brings it home that we are definitely on the way soon, and I feel very sad about that. I wanted to start just by saying and recording my and my family's sincere thanks to Montserrat, all on Montserrat. As I said before, we've had a wonderful time here. It's been a very joyful posting. The beauty of the island and the very fine, decent and gentle character of the people are really fond memories for us, and will live with us long after we leave Montserrat. So we are very sad to be leaving, and very, very grateful for the warm welcome that Montserrat has given to us, and feel very lucky to have lived in this beautiful, unspoilt environment for the last 4 years. We love our wildlife, as I think a lot of our friends in Montserrat know. We love our scenery and our hiking, and to have been here sort of sitting happily in this beautiful environment whilst the pandemic rages around in the world, we feel very lucky. So thank you very much, ladies and gents, on that. I would just say also that we're joining each other today on what's a very sad day, in the sense that the context that we're all in here with sorry, just a moment. It's a little bit distracting with the talking. Could we just sort of have the one conversation, please? It's a bit difficult with the press conference if there's a lot of background discussion. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make a point that how sad it is for humanity that we're meeting today in a press conference with all the terrible events going on in the Ukraine, and you see these enormous military convoys descending on peaceful cities of a sovereign friendly country like Ukraine. You see the missile strikes in the middle of the cities. You see hundreds of thousands of women and children on the move. It's like a scene from the worst of the big land wars of World War I and World War II. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking that humanity has to deal with this and counter it. But counter it we will. It is absolutely unacceptable. The world is uniting in not accepting it and standing up to it. And let's be strong and absolutely stalwart in our values, ladies and gents, against that aggression. Okay, folks, over to questions.
No, I don't want to come first. There you go.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
Dwight Sampson, DS Media. Governor, I have listened to your opening remarks. And I have to register my disappointment. This being your final press conference as Governor of Montserrat, I expected a little bit more in terms of, your tenure, your stint here, more than we are a nice place to vacation. Governor, you have had successive press conferences. You have had successive interviews on the radio. I understand that there's a media house that would have done an interview with you as well. You have had numerous conversations, public engagements, etc. Successive press conferences, you have spoken on different topics. One of those topics that you have registered concerned over is the processes within the public service relating to discipline, disciplinary actions, and how they go about the timing, etc.
Yes.
Now that you're at the end of your tenure as governor, can you give us an update as to your actions, your decisions, your policies that would have somehow changed some of these? And if you ever had any success, and if not, what are you leaving for the incoming holder of your office?
Okay, Dwight. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm sorry, did you want to ask a...
Go ahead.
No? Okay. No. It's just you were talking, so I wasn't clear if you wanted to ask a question or not. Huh?
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, thank you. Just on your first point about disappointment, I mean, this is a final press conference. I and my family, we're human beings, and we have feelings, and we've had a lot of press conferences where we chew through all the detail of sort of politics and economics and things, and the public service. So I wanted to lead with my personal thanks to Montserrat. And I mean what I said. It's been a very happy 4 years to us. I do find this a wonderful and joyful place. And that's not just sort of soft, pappy stuff. That's real. It's from us. And I hope that Montserratians will hear that and feel heartened by it, that a guest in the country with this sort of job comes away with those feelings. So to be frank, just to push back a little bit, I'm entitled to say my personal feelings about Montserrat. I have done, and I hope people won't find that disappointing. I hope they will listen to it and respect it. On your question about the public service reforms and discipline, I mean, we've had quite a lot of discussion of this. This is a very big topic, very big subject. I am frank in feeling, as I come to the end of the 4 years here, that I haven't done as much as I would have liked to have done. I've mentioned the point before that for a lot of appointees, British governor appointees, it's quite a sharp learning curve here. Not just here, in the overseas territories work. I've certainly found that. And if I knew now, if I knew at the start rather, what I know now, I think that would have got me off to more of a flying start in terms of reforms. And I think there's some lessons in that for the way the overseas territories work together with the British government. I think this issue of continuity and understanding is very important. So I would make those 2 points, first of all, in answer to your question. But I would say, I think, two things in addition, Dwight. One is that in public service work and leadership and senior management, you can have an impact by being as well as by doing. So when you come into work and you meet people and you take decisions, the way you do it, the values you project in how you do it, your commitment to certain principles can be very telling. And that sort of leadership, it may not be as tangible as I've changed this policy or I've brought in this project, but it's also a very, very important facet of leadership. And I do feel that here in Montserrat, one of my strengths has been my very staunch commitment to principles of fairness and integrity. People, doing what they are required to do in their jobs and being thanked and compensated accordingly, and all pulling together. Those things I think are important, and I've lived my life here by those maxims, and I think that's had an impact. So I would make that point. And then in terms of the more sort of tangible aspects of structural reforms, I think, again, we've had this conversation quite a bit. I very strongly believe in simplification. Montserrat's structures and governance have become too complex. It's well-intentioned, but they are just too many of them, too multifold, and it confuses people, and it sort of dilutes the key messages. So I'm a great believer in simplification. We have, it's been a little bit late in the term, but we have arranged quite a big public consultation on the integrity architecture. It's been very well handled, I thought, by Peter White and the colleagues on that panel. We've considered that in our public sector reform task group, and we are now putting a paper, I think indeed this week, to Cabinet with some quite radical suggestions for proposals for restructuring, streamlining and simplification. And that, I won't be here to see the output of that. And I'm sorry, I would have liked to have been, but that's a really good start now on a critical phase of that journey towards public sector improvement.
Usually I come to these press conferences and I only have one or two questions. I'm not the list of question person. But let me just say before I ask my second question that when I say that I'm disappointed, I'm not saying that your sentiments on Montserrat are not welcome. What I'm saying is that for your opening remarks, I expected to hear at least a list, want of a better word, of some of your accomplishments during your tenure here on Montserrat. Secondly, Governor, the reason why I asked this question, and I know we do expect them to happen, we are human beings and we function within the perimeter of our human intellect. But we have been having these conversations, as you have rightfully said, for an extended period of time. But at the end of your tenure, we still have issues relating to suspensions. Persons being suspended and no proper information is being given around the suspension. There's been a shake-up in HR, and up to this day, we haven't had, as a media, let me speak on behalf of DS Media, because it seems like we have waves in the media as well. Some media houses get certain things, others don't get them. We have a shake-up in HR where I haven't received any notification. I have not gotten any information whatsoever about what's going on in HR, despite numerous calls. So at the end of your tenure, these are the issues that we are facing, Governor. And I'm saying if those issues were not dealt with or fixed, my question is, what are you leaving for the incoming holder of your office? Or are we going to continue to have these issues prolonged for
a long time to come? Okay. I mean, this press conference was not intended and isn't intended to be a sort of balance sheet for me as governor. I didn't come here intending to sort of list all the pluses and all the minuses. I'm happy to be asked questions on that, and if you wanted to ask that question, I'll give you an answer, but I answered it at our last press conference, as you may recall, and I've been asked it a number of times on other media, including by ZJB, so I didn't want to sort of be repetitive, but I'm happy to give you an answer to that as well if you want again now. As far as the public service sort of suspensions issue is concerned, I mean, perhaps to address the specific first, you have asked me that before, and I have said before that there are some reforms underway in HR, and the senior management of the HR function has had a managed move from that position. There's an acting officer in place, and a review is underway on various aspects of improvement in the way we deal with HR matters. And that is the position. I appreciate that the media are interested, and I'm sure that some other members of the public service, not just Governor, because I'm a little distant, obviously, from the day-to-day detail of it, would be happy to speak more. But it isn't normally right or the case that the public and the media should have the details of every individual suspension of a public servant or disciplinary action of a public servant, or on the other side of the house, performance bonuses of public servants and things. Those are matters that are, to some extent, sort of private to a public service. A major appointment, like a new permanent secretary, those sorts of things, yes, absolutely. And I think we generally do those sorts of things. But the communication at the detailed level, particularly around more sensitive matters like discipline, is not normally dealt with in a public debate. So people, if the media want that, they may be disappointed for a long time to come, because it's not the way things are done, to put it bluntly. And I don't think ZJB or yourself in your own media house would welcome it if your own internal questions and disputes and performance management concerns were sort of debated in public. So sorry to be a bit blunt about it, but there are limits on what is legitimate public debate and discussion to protect individuals and their confidentiality. As far as the sort of public service suspensions issue more generally is concerned, what was quite a big backlog of suspensions when I arrived has been cut back dramatically. There are very many less. I've taken a number of some quite tough decisions on those cases, and as far as I'm aware, the great majority are sorted. So I'd recommend that if you want to talk in sort of generic terms, total numbers terms, by all means do that. But we've worked our way through that backlog quite diligently, and as I say, I don't think there are so many outstanding. Yeah. James, yeah.
I'd just like to take you back to the initial question asked by my colleague, primarily based on the public service. And clearly, we have a myriad of issues, even challenges within the public service. There are a number of issues that have not been addressed. And when we look at what is actually happening, it is, issues are caused to fester, and prolonged. You've been here for 4 years, and clearly there are a number of things, as I mentioned before, that have arisen, and very little, if anything, has been done. There are challenges, I know. You probably would have experienced some of those challenges, and now you're leaving. What has been put in place to ensure that these issues are addressed, aimed at resolutions then?
Well, I think you have to stand back as well. Sorry, did you?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Your Excellency.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think you have to stand back as well, and sometimes when we get close to issues, human beings, we can be a bit sort of negative. We can look at things through the negative prism. I appreciate there are quite a lot of frustrations in Montserrat's public service and from the point of view of the public towards the public service, but this is a public service that actually does a pretty good job when you look at the numbers of tasks it has, whether it's airport immigration, airport safety, policing, schools, hospitals, a big vaccination campaign. All these different issues are pretty substantial. They'd be substantial for a medium-sized country, let alone a very small overseas territory of like Montserrat. And I think we should incline ourselves also to celebrate some of the real successes. One of those is definitely the handling of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. There are very few countries and territories that have handled the pandemic as sure-footedly, consistently and prudently as Montserrat. Very, very few. And that's a real feather in the cap of our public service, a real feather in their cap. Also, if you look at what's been achieved in the last 4 years, when I came here, there was a palpable frustration at what was seen as a lack of sort of critical infrastructure. Now, 4 years on, we have a nicely resurfaced airport runway. We have a smart new airport control tower. We have fiber optic digital connections to the whole island. We have a contract signed for a £30 million port. We have a contract signed for a £15 million hospital. And I don't know if you've seen, James, the outline design. If you haven't, you should have a look, because it's a really nice design. It's a really well put together concept for that hospital. We're undertaking some critical repairs in the Montserrat Secondary School. We have a new, I think here people call it a hot mix. I used to calling it a tarmac machine, but a big tarmac road laying machine on its way to us right now. We've had a commitment to build a new parliament together with other sort of functions as well. So what do you call it? A multi-purpose building commitment from the UK at very senior level. That is a succession of major successes coming through the COVID pandemic and consolidating infrastructure in this island, none of which had been done in the previous 23 years, is worthy of big celebration. So if people have a frustration that they feel somebody they know in the public service was suspended a bit too long, or there were 3 people suspended instead of none, then those are micro things. The big picture list that I've just given you there are the major things. And Montserratians need to lift their eyes to that horizon and see all of those things that have been delivered here with tens and tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money and support from the UK to Montserrat. So I would ask people, that's what I was saying at the start, to look at the picture from a more positive prism than sometimes we're inclined to when we get too close to things. As far as the public service is concerned, let me be frank on this. Montserrat's public service, it isn't paid as much as I would like it to be. Its salary and allowance structure is too complex. It's too complex and it causes confusion. And as we've spoken before, the integrity and governance systems are too complex. But ultimately, people here have jobs in the public service. They're secure jobs. They're in reasonable conditions. And they come to work. And it's us. If we want to make Montserrat really work, and we want to be happy, and we want to get a good service and give a good service, it's us. It's not me. I can't sit here and shadow the desk of every one of our 997 public servants and make sure that when someone phones or writes, they give an answer courteously and quickly. I can't. It's not my job. I'm not paid to do it. I'm one person. It's Montserrat and Montserratians and the people you elect. You need to do that. You need to look to yourselves to do that, to make the public service work in the way you want it. It's not for me to sit here and design a blueprint for you. I'm sorry, but you've asked the question fairly bluntly, so you're getting a fairly blunt Andy Pearce answer.
I am happy with your blunt answer. But, sir, with all due respects, you have direct oversight of the public service and to ensure that certain measures are put in place. Now, exorbitant amounts of money have been spent on public sector reform, and there is very little, if anything, to show. So that is the basis for my asking the question. So from here on, what?
Well, I mean, I just go back on. I don't think exorbitant sums have been spent. I think there have been too many consultancies. There have been several while I've been here, less by a long way than in, I think, previous governorships, to be frank, because I have tried to put up a bit of a wall against endless consultancies. But there certainly have been some, but they're not massive sums of money by definition. What is needed here, and I think there is a pathway in these things. We've been 26 years trying to reform the public service, let's be frank. there's a pathway in these things, and we've not gone as far and as deep as I would have liked. But I think we do now have an agreement, and it's important that the agreement is with the parties in the UK as well, because the funding and the resourcing needs to come from there as well. But I think there is now a much stronger consensus around the need for simplification of the way the public service works, simplification of salaries, grades, allowances, far too many different micro bands of all those things. Particularly important is to bring back into the public service's own sense of responsibility for discipline and performance, not to outsource it to another body. We're sitting in this room as a public service. If someone is turning up late repeatedly, or if somebody's doing a great job and being very creative and innovative and entrepreneurial, each of those things needs a reaction. And it's for the public service to react and manage and guide and build, not to outsource it to the Public Service Commission or the DG's office or me. Yes, I have strategic oversight, but it's strategic. It's not micro. And again, I come back to people needing to do that and needing to sort of take control themselves and take responsibility themselves. So I hope that we've not done as much as I would have wished. I accept that. I'm quite critical of myself on that. But I do think there's a really important piece of progress, is that there's a much stronger meeting of minds on what is needed, and the steps are in place to move in that direction in the coming years. But it won't be, you know, like 2 or 3 months. It's a longer job than that. And there's another factor too, and this is really important, is that you can't do the sort of transformation of a public service that we need here on top of the day job. You can't have busy people working flat out, already working 10-hour days, and then 10 minutes at the end of the day drawing up a blueprint for public sector reform. It's a nonsense. It doesn't work. You need a dedicated and substantial team, like an intervention force in local government in the UK, to come in and shift the dial in transformation. It's tens of people are needed.
I'm going to pass to my colleagues because we can go on and on with this 26 years, and we are in the same position, starting all over again every time. So I was just looking for a strategic framework as to how we can address the situation with the public service. But I'll hand over to my colleague.
Echi, good morning.
Morning.
My first question to you is Scotland Yard. There's an air of secrecy around. They're here. Can you give us a little overview, a little update on what is happening with them?
No, I mean, I think you and your colleagues have asked a couple of times about that. I mean, I think we're clear that there are a group of UK serving and retired police here on Ireland, a small number of them. They are appointed as special constables, because that's the way it works here under the Constitution, to work in the Royal Montserrat Police Service. So they work to Commissioner Steve Foster. Some of their work is around reforms. You know, these are long processes. It's not just the sort of non-police, non-security side of the public service that needs reform. The police side certainly does as well. So there's some work going on that. And also some of these individuals have particular fields of expertise where they can support Commissioner Foster in his operational investigations. I am not cited on those. Governors aren't and shouldn't be. And by all means do ask Commissioner Foster, but he will be very limited, I think, in what he can say too, just as he would be about investigations by any parts of his police force, because, again, it goes back to the point I think that Dwight was making, that, you know, it's not that people are trying to be secretive or you know, cooking up some cunning plan or something. It's just that it's not right, it's not fair to people who may be being investigated, for example, to put out that all this is going on. That's really where it is, I think, Malika, if that helps.
Thank you. To follow up, I'm not following up, but it's your final press conference with us. And I took time out of my maternity just to come and say goodbye, bon voyage.
Thank you, that's very nice of you.
Alugana Express worked along with you. You know, questions asked, you were able to answer. You gave us interviews whenever there was not even a press conference. And so we say thank you and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you. And congratulations on your addition to the family.
Good morning, Honourable Pearce. How are you?
Hi there. Yeah, not too bad. Thank you.
My colleagues are giving you a lot of pressure this morning, so I'll lighten it up for you.
No, that's all right.
Benir Bass, 664 Connect Media. So in business and government, continuous improvement is the key. Can you list some of the recommendations that you're taking back to the FCDO about how to improve Montserrat civil service and the way that it's currently being managed, please?
Well, so thank you, Benir. Some of it, I think, goes back to the answers I was giving a bit earlier to Dwight and James. I've recommended a number of things to the FCDO, and I'm open with Government of Montserrat colleagues about that, so I don't think it would be unreasonable of me to just give a little bit of information on those. I have recommended that we take a strategic simplification of the public service. So I've recommended that we get away from Complaints Commission, Integrity Commission, Public Service Commission in some of its functions, and we pare that back, that we look to create a single sort of supra body for dealing with the highest level concerns and complaints about integrity. And that can be for anybody and about anybody. So it isn't that it only applies to the police, or it only applies in the last year, or it only applies to the public service. It's for an island of this size, 4,600 people. My recommendation is simplicity. So one body, it might be called an ombudsman function, you could call it Integrity Commission if you wanted, but whatever you call it, it's one thing only. And that the expectation is that every institution, every part of the system has its own processes for trying to manage itself fairly. If there are complaints and concerns, you deal with those first as far as you can, but when you can't, when it gets to a level that's beyond that, it comes to this one body only. So that's one thing. I think the extent of requirements for people serving on these commissions and bodies to declare all their assets in detail, I think is a bit unbalanced here. It was no doubt well-intentioned, but I think that too needs reduction. It's right that we should say what we've got in senior positions in public service. It's right we should say those, record them, but certainly not to sort of broadcast them over the whole of society. And I don't think it's right that that should extend to, right throughout our families. It's there as a sort of long stop. So I think that needs reduction. I think when it comes to disciplinary processes and to some extent performance management, but particularly disciplinary processes in the public service, there is a lot of unhappiness with those. I sense that. And I think it comes from a number of things. Primarily, it's because senior managers in the public service are not expecting and are not expected to really deal with disciplinary issues. They take a sort of distance from it. And so when somebody does something that's clearly wrong and unacceptable, they're not going and speaking straight away to that person and having the sort of conversation you would, perhaps in a family or something, when somebody's behaving not right, and making it clear and sort of setting guidelines and managing things. And then recording it, because you have to record these things, because otherwise there's different perspectives. They're not doing that, and there's a sense of it being outsourced to the Public Service Commission, or maybe the DG, or maybe even myself and my office. And that, I don't think, works effectively, because it means there's a huge burden on having to write and brief the Public Service Commission, and people don't really do that. The Public Service Commission feels distance from it. People going and appearing before the Public Service Commission, it feels too sort of challenging and conflictual. I think we need a reduction. The Public Service Commission does a great job, and I really appreciate it, but it needs to focus on the most critical, most serious disciplinary issues and the top and senior appointments, sort of strategic. The actual management of the public service needs to be returned to the public service. Those, I think, are particularly important series of reforms. I also feel here that I see repeatedly that as a small island team, people battle to spend fully the budget each year. I quite understand that. I have the same in my own office, and I've had it around the world in many different embassies and posts. I had it as head of security, and it's not sensible. If you can make savings in 1 year, then you should have the benefit of carrying those over to the advantage of your budget and system the next year. And to say that you have to rush and buy things because there's some gate comes down at the end of March, and then after that you have to start all over again, is a huge waste of human resources and effort. So whatever the British government's formal treasury rules, there are different reasons for having different rules in the UK because it's much greater size and complexity. Here in Montserrat, there needs to be more flexibility around the way those budgets can be handled to the benefit of everybody. So, I mean, those are a sort of a flavour. There's a lot. I mean, as you'd expect, there's a very great deal indeed of recommendations, but there's some of them.
Thank you very much for your answer there. So Montserrat's economy is affected by outside forces like COVID, Brexit, and now the war between Russia and Ukraine. In your opinion, what are some of the opportunities still available to Montserrat to boost its economy?
Thank you. I mean, I don't mean to be picky at all, Verner, but I'm just conscious of the sensitivity of these things. When we say a war between Russia and Ukraine, this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is an aggressive, unprovoked assault on Ukraine by the Russian military, blowing up their cities and killing women and children as well as some members of the armed forces. It's a shocking and disgusting situation. It is not a war between two parties, not at all. As far as the economy is concerned, I know, we're a tiny population, 4,600 people, workforce maybe 2,300, something like that, 2,400. Half of which, roughly, a little bit less, are public sector and need to be really. I mean, we can reduce a bit here and there, but the demands on the public service are big, so we're always going to be a substantial public service, 30-40% of workforce probably, for a long while to come. So we have to accept that and recognise that's the particular balance and character of the island's economy. But what that means then that's left for the sort of private entrepreneurial side of the economy, my own view, and it's only my own view, and it's for Montserratians to choose. You live here, you've got your stake in the island, is I wouldn't rush to too many big projects. I wouldn't personally rush to do lots of sort of big housing complexes or big hotels and bring in that sort of tourism. I don't think it will benefit the island in the long run. I think it brings risks to the island. So my sense is that, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 maybe really well-designed, more niche economic projects here could really deliver the mustard for us. We've talked a little bit before about what some of those might be. A golf course and a small boutique hotel would bring in a particular type of clientele, and people would absolutely love to play golf against the backdrop of our volcano or some of the beautiful central hills. But the sort of people who have the pockets that want to play those games and can also like a reasonably comfortable, sort of a place to stay, and some sort of nicely designed boutique hotel could be highly successful here. Absolutely highly successful. And you don't need thousands of guests. You need a few hundred guests at that level, to make quite a difference. I think I've always felt here that agriculture and certain products here are fantastic. It's so fertile, particularly in certain bands away from the volcano where the emissions from the volcano bring with them lots of minerals, potentially highly fertile environment here, but it does need some investment to make it manageable for people. And, regalvanizing agriculture, producing top-end fruit products, vegetable products to supply the hotels, high-quality hotels of the region, and people here on island with their own food, I think could be brilliant. I include in that, I know it can be a little sensitive because it's a God-fearing society and not everyone wants to focus on agriculture, on alcohol, but there is a strong historical Irish connection. Irish whiskey companies, Irish distilleries are a big thing. They have a huge market worldwide. Some sort of Montserrat-branded, Irish distillery-connected operation, which also goes back to the roots of growing an area of traditional sugarcane and perhaps actually even, restarting a traditional sugar mill, at least for sort of an element of the product, I think could be fantastic. It has everything. It has fascination for people. It has a window on history. has a really nice product that a lot of very supportive people from Montserrat would want to buy. And I have in my sort of quiver lots of ideas of that sort, but you don't need more than 3, 4, 5, 6 of those to really work. And this economy is quite transformed, with my own view, but it won't be shared by everyone.
Answers there, sir. I'd just like to take this opportunity myself to thank you for always being open to having interviews with me. We've done 3 interviews, including our final interview, which will be aired on 664 Connect Media on the 6th. Thank you very much for the work that you've done to assist Montserrat. It's been a terribly difficult time, and I wish you nothing but success in the future.
That's very nice of you, Renee. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm sure that you would recognize that most of all the questions have centered around what I would call, and you're familiar with, good governance. And good governance really, I believe you'll agree, does come under, you're the one who would have to report on it. And I did ask you before, how do you perceive good governance in Montserrat, and how the UK government perceive us as far as good governance is concerned? And if you wish me, I'll give you just quick background.
Yeah.
It's from the 2012.
The white paper?
No, that included, but the MOU that we signed, which was supposed to be the beginning of our future. All this time, 2018, 2020, we were supposed to be out there. But 2018, 2020, we've had the COVID thing, but we were nowhere in 2018. Good governance was very important. And so just tell me quickly, before I get into the follow-up here, how do you perceive good governance overall in Montserrat?
Well, no, thank you, Bennett, there. I mean, I don't want to sort of repeat too much of what I was saying earlier, but in essence, I think the structures probably look quite good from the perspective of somebody sitting in London, to put it bluntly, or maybe a bigger overseas territory like a Bermuda or a Cayman. The structures we have here are quite closely allied with those, and they probably look quite good. You know, an overarching integrity commission, a complaints commission that's a bit more maladministration focused, public service commission that seems to have quite a chunky role. It all looks okay in that sense, but it's too complex. A large part of its heart is not in place and never has been with the integrity commission, so it doesn't work. And rather than sort of keep banging our head against it and keep trying to, you know, push the same block up the road, sometimes when something's not working, and it hasn't worked since, well, 2012, you were saying, Bennett, there, it's time to take a fresh look. So you've asked me to be frank, and I will be. I think Montserrat's governance needs a fresh look. I think it needs real streamlining. It needs one body that works. But at the end of all of that, it's a little bit like the discussion we were having there with James on the public service and its quality. At the end of it all, it's people. You can have all sorts of fancy structures. You can have one body, 3, 5, call it what you like. At the end of the day, it really depends on individuals having the courage, the principles, and the drive to really deliver on the governance. Otherwise, it's just there in name. You get reports and you defend it all, and it's sort of email ping pong, and it goes nowhere. In the end, it depends on the quality of people. It really does. And so that is something that Montserrat also needs to look to itself over. It matters to Montserratans. I see it does. I feel it does, to run the territory in a very fair and fair way and an honest way, honourable way. Montserratans are that sort of people. But to make it happen, we have to speak up. We have to speak up and stand out when we see things are not done right. We have to take responsibility. We have to make our values known. And that will be the case, whatever the precise technical structure.
There's a matter that has been, a lot of this, Your Excellency, as we talk about the public service, et cetera, and as I said, comes down through under you, coming right all the way down, there's this matter of the deputy governors. A lot of questions have been around, talking around, and there's this one matter that actually ended up in the House. And while we're sitting here, we have these people are concerned, questions are coming in to us to ask a few, ton loads of them. And one of them has to do with the contract and this salary situation, which the Minister of Finance claims to know nothing about. Or eventually he said, well, I know about it, but he was not consulted about, and so on and so on. Could you clarify for us what really happened, where the deputy governor ended up with an increase in what is salary or perks or whatever it was that you apparently initially did not sanction? Could you clarify that for us, please?
Well, I thank you, Bennett. I mean, this one has been rattling around a bit, and we have spoken about it before, and I have tried to clarify it. There's a limit to what I can say beyond what I've already said, but let me sort of recap on it. The deputy governor here has a really tough job. We all have tough jobs in our own way. Of course we do. You do in the media. It's not easy for you. You have to be perpetually alert and on your best form in front of the public. We know that, and we really appreciate the role you play. I appreciate your right to ask me these questions, and your right to put me, as Venair was saying, it under a bit of pressure. I like it, I respect it, I want it. I've been used to it all around the world, and it's a very good thing. So please don't feel it's something to back off from. You're doing absolutely the right thing. But as far as the DG is concerned, she has a particularly tough job. People who haven't experienced that job wouldn't necessarily know, but this is a tiny territory with thin resources. It has a relatively big public service compared to other aspects, and the public service doesn't have the sort of freedom. Bennett.
Yes,
sorry, but it's a little disconcerting because you asked me the question, so if you're on your phone, if you want the answer, please pay attention.
Governor.
I mean it. If you ask me a question and you want the answer, then pay attention. Okay? So you've asked me a question and I'm now trying to answer it. The Deputy Governor's job is a tough one. It's a particularly tough one. This is a public service which has a lot of reasons for feeling grumpy about things. Its management over the past 25 years has been perhaps a little erratic for whatever reason, because of the pressures from the volcanic era and things. So somebody doing that job, trying to keep this 1,000 people sort of happy and well run, cannot conceivably do it all in perfection every day themselves. It's a big job. And I would just ask that people also give respect to that in some of the comments I see, respect and recognition of that. These are tough jobs. People pay quite a heavy personal price if they care about them and want to do them well. The DG's been here for all of my time. She was appointed before I arrived. That appointment was approved by Lord Ahmed, British Minister at the time, on the basis of advice, and I think she's done a very good job. There have been, I think, is it 3 contracts in total? The first contract, then there was one just as I was arriving, and then there's another most recent one for about 2 years until the end of this year. So the 3 contracts for the DG. I can't recall precisely what the differences were between the very first contract I think it was like a sort of acting DG for 2017, something like that. And the next one, I can't remember exactly, it's a little bit before my time, but there were a few changes, and they were changes around the margins of a contract to things like telephone allowance and this sort of thing. A few small things of that sort, not a major set of changes, and entirely normal for people when they move from a sort of, I suppose you might call it almost a probationary type of appointment to fully fledged contract. It's quite normal to have a few adjustments of that sort, and almost everybody on the island has those sorts of adjustments. When it came to the very latest contract, I think I've answered this before, but I will say it again clearly. There were discussions. My view was that it would not be right. I wanted to pay everybody more, but my view is that it would not be right to pay the DG or any other senior member of the public service an increase because we are in the middle of COVID. Everybody's under pressure, public service under pressure certainly, public service pay bill limited to about a 3 to 4% rise each year because of the increment system, which raises the salary for people below the top level of their pay grades, but still under pressure. But the private sector obviously really feeling the pain and the pinch. So it did not feel right to me to give a salary increase, and I didn't approve one. For some reason, there was some sort of mistake made in the paperwork, a misunderstanding, and I didn't read all the details of how many dollars and pennies. It's not really for a governor, to be frank, to have to read all those things. But I signed the letter of appointment without rereading and checking myself personally in detail those terms and conditions. That was my mistake, my bad, and is a very important lesson for many people, I think, in leadership, that what's the old adage in arms control? Trust but verify. So I've said that, I've explained it to the Premier, I've explained it in writing to the Premier, so he knows all that, because he obviously has to answer these things in Parliament, and that is the position. Now, the amount that was increased was in one particular allowance where there was a judgment taken, it seems, within HR that there was an appropriate level for that allowance, and the DG was not at that level, and therefore, to be fair and consistent, there should have been an increase. I didn't spot it, I wasn't told about it, and I didn't approve it, but it went through on that basis. Now, to be fair to people, somebody gets a contract, they sign it in good faith, they don't know either, they're getting that contract, they can assume, I think, that it was all reasonably approved. And so on it went for 6-7 months or so until it was brought to the attention of Parliament, quite rightly. Now it's had that attention. I've asked for 2 reviews. I asked for 1 review which didn't, to be honest, quite do the job. I want to be fair to people. And so I think I've explained before that I've asked for another review. This time I've asked for it to be done by a fully independent, judicially trained individual. And that is just starting. And it's not intended to throw the book at anyone or be unkind to anyone. It's just intended to sort out what was an unfortunate mistake, not major sums of money involved at all, not an increase in the salary, no increase in salary, just an adjustment in one allowance only, on the basis that it was intended to sort of level it out. Now I've asked, because I don't know all the details of allowance systems and how they're calculated, I've asked for a full report on it, how it happened, and a lessons learned recommendation. Unfortunately, because of the pressure on people on their different jobs, I don't think I'm going to get that. I won't get it before I go. So I've briefed my successor, because it obviously shouldn't be handled by the Deputy Governor herself. That wouldn't be right for her to review her own situation in that way. So there'll be a little bit of a gap, and then this report will be written by a highly competent and independent individual. And that should bring an end to this story. And I would ask people, please do not fixate on this. It is exactly as I've said, exactly and precisely as I've just said. There is no scurrilous plan, no trying to pay somebody under the door or give them any of it. It is exactly and precisely as I, as the Governor here, have said. Now, please, let the process work, and let's focus on more important and bigger things. This is not trying to hoodwink anyone or waste public funds. It is none of those things. It's a small misunderstanding that happens in life.
A quick reaction to what you've said. You see, the problem there, Your Excellency, when we're talking about the people right at the top, having whatever small thing and so on, it goes all the way down, and that does create a big problem that we're talking about. You mentioned something about public sector reform task group. We have such a body. Has that been publicized? Is that something that I should have known, or anybody else here might know?
Well, it's been in press releases and things for a year or so. It was noted, I think.
Okay, all right, then I'll go find it.
So, okay, I mean, basically it's a small group that was formed to build on the work of now what was it called? Empowering Excellence, I think? Something
the
like
Power
that.
of Excellence.
So it sort of followed that on with a slightly different remit, because the Empowering Excellence remit was to redo the General Orders and the Public Administration Act. And for various reasons, it's a bit too complex to get into here. That was really going down a wrong track. You need to reset some of the tectonics first. And so the Public Sector Reform Task Group was formed a year and a half ago, I think, to drive that forward.
Yes, there is just one. I know we have. Okay, well, maybe I should get to this because I know time is obviously running out and I'll see you now. What would you say? This question is coming out of perhaps even something you've gone to before. What would you say would be your 1, 2, 3 achievements, what you can leave and say you're proud of that you've achieved these things?
That's always a tricky question, that one. I would say I'm certainly very pleased that at the end of the 4 years, the sort of infrastructural side of Montserrat is in a qualitatively better place. It's still not quite where it should be. Still got a journey to go, but I'm very pleased that we have a port contract now signed for a really good £30 million plus project. We were nowhere near that when I first came. It was just argument and noise and heat. And the same with the hospital. We know where we're going to build it. We know the outline design. We know what they call the functional content or the spread of clinical services, and it's really good. It's really nice. And we're fibre optic connected, or everybody on island is apart from me, and which is also very good thing. And we have a smart new airport that's in an altogether better shape because of the control tower with state-of-the-art equipment soon to arrive in it, and the runway. So those sorts of things I would say I feel very comfortable about. It's not that it just ends there either. I mean, there's a sort of commitment now to a follow-on pipeline. It's called CIPREG, this project that did most of those things apart from the port. There's a clear political commitment on both sides of the Atlantic to a CIPREG 2, and right high up amongst them is a multi-purpose parliamentary building. That's an absolute sea change for Montserrat, to put it bluntly.
Yep.
Here. It's probably 110, 120 million pounds of investment. For 4,000 people, that's big. So I would put that right up there, and it doesn't always appear this way, but the governor and governor's office have played a huge part in that. When I arrived, we had a thing called a high-level panel, and the original slate of projects proposed for infrastructure were all invented offshore. And there was a great amount of heat and annoyance over it all. I'm just telling it as it is. Right now we have a steering committee, which is a much more consultative and collegiate body. We have a joint commitment to the projects, a joint recognition that we have to prioritise, and they're being really well run through the office of the PMO. So that's a real sea change. I would put that as right up there as number one. Sorry, but no, please.
You are in this new position, FCDO, Foreign Colonial Development thing. So you're much closer to our finances, of how the financial thing. You even have some authority there in terms of how the finances go in Montserrat.
Well, I was going to say, I won't take too long because I know perhaps it's only a half question from you, but I would put that up there quite high. I know it might not seem it, but I think the amalgamation of the FCDO, it's caused a lot of issues. The new ministry is still not fully bedded down and at ease with itself. That will take time. But as far as Montserrat's part of the picture is concerned, it's really helped. And I've very personally and strongly driven a more coherent approach by the British government side collectively here, bringing together the governor's office in all its parts, the old DFID and the old FCO. So we actually work together and feed into each other supportively. It may not feel it from the perspective of a sort of customer or a media colleague, but that's beginning to make a big difference.
In that CIPREG thing, Your Governor, not just the Parliament building, but one perhaps that will house the courthouse. So the Parliament building, a courthouse, and a Premier's residence. That will bring some dignity to that position. So those three things I think we'd like to see go together. Governor, could you tell us a little bit about this? I'm not sure about this, but the surplus that we have. You mentioned a while ago about monies and so on, and I understood the government reported that they've had a surplus, and there were all these needs that you've been just alluding to.
continue with your answer to Mr. Roach's question. We've just come up to our 1 hour mark, so this may be the last question, and I believe other members of the press had indicated they wanted to make a couple of remarks to close out our press conference.
Okay. Well, look, I'm happy with that. I mean, I don't myself, this is the last press conference, and you've all kindly come together here. So I don't mind if you want to have another 10, 15 minutes. That's fine by me. That's the limit. But if we make it, that's the sort of limit, that's no problem. As far as and I don't think Kai, for example, has asked a question if he wanted to ask anything, so, no problem. As far as the underspend is concerned, or the surplus, I mean, obviously it's really for the Financial Secretary and for the Premier as Finance Minister to answer you fully on that. It wouldn't be right for me, but my understanding is that we're running a current projected underspend for this financial year of somewhere around $4 to $4.5 million Caribbean dollars. Government, I think, has acknowledged that and is working hard to try and to find a best use of the money. These things arise for a whole host of reasons. For much of the year, people are struggling to try and make savings and in other areas. And one of the troubles, we touched on this about the inability under the British Treasury rules to roll over funding, is it can be extremely difficult to do procurement in short time frames. So if you leave things until the last quarter of the financial year to buy a new fire engine or whatever it is, reservoir or something, you just can't do it, particularly with COVID. You need good long lead times, and it's frustrating. I've seen it happen now for 2 or 3 financial years, but this year it's in the ballpark of 4.5. Lindorna FS will give you a better answer, but it's roughly that, I think.
Governor Pearce, it's been a real honor having you here on the island. Both of us arrived pretty much on island at the same time. So from my perspective, I feel as though I've been able to see in my own ways some of the improvements and some of the changes that have come into play, because it was my own arrival that kind of opened my eyes to things that were happening. And so I have been able to see stage by stage as things progress through here. Now, very early on in the conference this morning, you mentioned continuity. And from my perspective, like I say, I've seen some things that have been actively going on and improving in the way of the island. How will we be able to ensure the continuity in phase 1? And also, in your future endeavors, I've noticed that you mentioned a number of projects or potential ideas surrounding Montserrat. Do you see yourself playing a role in lobbying on Montserrat's behalf in the future, or perhaps taking a different role to influence the island, considering that you've had such an impact personally and been impacted personally?
Well, no, thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's nice of you to say. Obviously, we always make sure that a successor is very fully briefed. And so my successor, Sarah Tucker, who arrived here around the end of March, we've had a number of conversations. She's also closely in touch with folks in my office, and soon we'll be speaking to people like the Deputy Governor and Premier and things. So there's a reasonably solid process of making sure we don't lose too much of the continuity and knowledge. But I must say, I think it is a big challenge for all that. We need to still keep working at it, because it's just not possible for a new governor to come in and rapidly get the sort of intuitive feel that it takes 4 years or more to build up. And some of our paperwork systems, our filing, and things are not quite where they should be, to be frank. It's quite hard to really coherently file hundreds of emails. So you almost need like a sort of summary report of each major issue. And there are risks in it, and I think we all need to come together to try and make sure that we don't lose momentum. I would love to, we will, my wife, Pawn Pan, myself, and my children, Pim and Guy, we are all absolute fans of Montserrat, and we will always remember Montserrat. We'll certainly be back, and we'll speak up for Montserrat wherever we can. As a governor, once you leave, there's a rule that for a year you should not sort of be seen to meddle with Montserrat. Or other OTs, and I think that's probably right. Sometimes you can give a useful steer, but in general, the new person needs their own time to settle. So I think that would be a courtesy and a professional response. But beyond that, we absolutely will be back here, 100%. And if there's any way we can help in the meantime, our door's always open. There's always a warm welcome and a hot cup of British tea for any Montserratian who's passing what will be our adopted home in Cornwall.
Governor,
Yes.
I know we had a little tugging this morning. It's all love.
I know that.
But the business of the people takes preeminence. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of DS Media to say very much thank you. I think that we had a very good working relationship throughout your tenure here. I've been here when you were here. It's surprising I've actually have sat through 3 governors so far, and you were my third.
Right, crikey.
Yes. So all the very best.
Thank you.
To you and your wife and family, and success in your future endeavors. We have had some very heated conversations on and off camera, in person and out of persons at various events and settings. And one of the things that I found that you have been resourceful, and you have had Montserrat at heart. So as you go off, don't forget us. And as you stated, we have had a lot of projects, a lot of capital projects and otherwise happening under your tenureship, and we do appreciate your service to Montserrat. So all the very best, and thank you so much for your service.
That's very kind of you, Dwight, and all the colleagues. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that, and I know my family will too. Thank you.
Your Excellency, I'm speaking on behalf of the ZJB family. And we are very happy that over the years that you had an open door and an open line. And if we had any issues that we could call on you, and you're always willing to give us a response, whatever it is. So I'm saying on behalf of the ZJB family, to your family, you and your family, to have a safe trip when the time comes. And always remember when you go to tell everybody that you come in contact with that Montserrat is still home, still nice, still paradise.
That's a nice little phrase. Thank you very much, James. Really appreciate it. Thanks to the whole team at ZJB. Thank you.
So my only regret, Your Excellency, is that James talked about an open house and so on and so on. And yes, I know we have had a couple private interviews and so on. Unfortunately, I haven't even had time to, not time, but a chance to report on them. And I too appreciate that. It's unfortunate that I think COVID took 2 years out of our lives, basically, and out of even perhaps disturbed what you might have been able to achieve, because I remember from our early press conferences that you were always ready for us to, we challenge you sometimes, and you would say, let us have like sort of extra get-togethers.
Yes.
And we've never had one, unfortunately. And I think we would have been able to accomplish a lot more. And that is my only regret with your presence here. But thank you very much for being open and trying to accommodate us. You always said how you love the press, but I don't think that has always been as reflective as you said it.
No, thank you very much.
Bon voyage, and remember us.
Thank you, Bennett. I really appreciate that. Thank you. No, COVID did put a bit of a wet blanket on things, didn't it? But at the same time, like a lot of these external challenges, it almost brought people together, I think, in the end, I felt here. You know, it's strange, so inner linings to some of these things. But thank you. Thank you. Brilliant.
And do we have any more comments from you, Governor? Because we will close off here.
Well, look, we've all said probably more than enough here, haven't we? But I just wanted to say thank you so much, ladies and gents of the media. It's not easy, your job. You're absolutely right to push for freedom of views and transparency. You're absolutely right to do that. And sometimes you get a few brickbats back as a result, but that's part of life, and I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed working together, and if I may say so, I've served in many different countries. I don't think I've ever had such a sort of courteous and gentle media corps I've commented before with Nestor and I sometimes chat about that, and so that's hugely to Montserrat's credit. Thank you very much. And as you say, it's an au revoir, not a goodbye.
And that brings us to the end of our press conference. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Have a great day.